Hi there. Hi, everybody. This is Kelly Dean from the Tummy Team, and this is our weekly live posting where we are going to be answering your questions. So, July is Diastasis Recti Awareness Month, and since the Tummy Team specializes in treating diastasis recti, we have been spending the whole month giving you as much information as we can. And we started out doing things like we are basically uh, answering all the most commonly Googled questions, right? And so every weekday in the month of July, we are posting those answers to those questions and resources to support those answers. So there's lots of resources out there. And the reason we think this is so important is that it's such a underdiagnosed condition that can have such dramatic impact on your life. And often clients are left on their own to just kind of search the internet to find solutions. And I want to help you in that search because that can be a daunting task. I just had a session with a client who said, one doctor told me this, another doctor told me this, another person told me this, and I feel completely helpless and I have no idea if this is ever going to get better. So we're trying to help. We're trying to help and trying to get you guys information and resources. And each week of the month, we are picking a different kind of topic to address your questions. And a lot of people have sent me in questions about diastasis. And this week, we're talking about diastasis recti and specifically fitness-related questions. So there are lots and lots of questions that people often ask, and I'm going to tackle some of those, but I'm going to specifically answer the questions people wrote in because I feel like that's cool. All right, so Lori wrote in and asked, is jumping on a rebounder tummy safe? So a rebounder is like a mini trampoline, right? And tummy safe is basically saying, tummy safe is a term that we coined years ago, where it's basically telling it's activities that don't push out or pull apart your abdominal wall. So tummy safe means fitness activities or movement activities that elongate you, draw your muscles together, don't put excessive pressure pushing out on the connective tissue of diastasis so that you are not causing trauma. All right, so when we talk tummy safe, that's what we're trying to say. So is a rebounder tummy safe? I think you guys are going to realize that a lot of my answers are going to be, most things can be tummy safe, but also most things cannot be tummy safe. So it's often not you can't do this exercise and you can do this exercise. It's almost always if you have the strength and connection and alignment to do these things without having these symptoms, then yes, you can do it. I know that seems vague, but it also could be really empowering, right? It's not so much a list of don'ts, all these don'ts. I usually tell people there's very few absolute don'ts. There's a lot of not yet, not until we can do this. Okay, so actually we had a rebounder in our clinic, and it is something that we've done with people. And what I think is what you want to look at is when you're talking about fitness and diastasis, there's two ways that we want to think about it. One, we don't want to be doing exercises with the best intention, getting the worst results, which means that we're doing stuff where we're pushing out on our abdominal wall when we thought we were strengthening our abdominal wall. So we want to avoid holding our breath, bearing down, pushing out, pushing down into the pelvic floor, clenching muscles that you're not meant to be clenching for that particular activity, that kind of thing. So one side is we want to not do things that might be causing damage because of weakness, because of movement patterns, because of connection issues that we have. And then the other side, we want to look at how can we get the most out of fitness to reinforce all the hard work you've done to rehab your core and to get you stronger and stronger, because your core is meant to be a multitasker. It activates so you can do everything else. And if any of you know my story, you know that I I was able to rehab my core from a 6-finger wide diastasis down to about 2.5. And that last 2.5 to closing it to 1 inch shallow came as a result of me returning to swimming, because I was reinforcing my core strength with every stroke I did. If I had started swimming at the beginning of my rehab process, I guarantee you I would have made my core and my diastasis worse, because I didn't have the foundational pieces. So if you think in that way, we want to get to the point where fitness is really, really helping us. All right. So back to the rebounder question. So if you can't feel pretty connected to your core, you know how to exhale, elongate, and draw the muscles together in that zipping up fashion that we instruct in, and you can stay in neutral pelvis, neutral rib cage, then I feel like a little bit of rebounder is a great thing to start transitioning. The biggest thing the reason we do rebounder stuff and have helped people in that is because I feel like it's a very controlled way to start getting the connection between your core and your pelvic floor with simulated higher impact stuff, but you're not high impacting. So when I'm having people on the rebounder, I don't have them jumping. I don't have their feet off of the ground initially. I have them kind of going back and forth, side to side, back and forth, side to side. Can they connect to their core and pelvic floor, core and pelvic floor, core and pelvic floor, so that we get that functional movement of the slow twitch and the fast twitch muscles of the core and the pelvic floor in a very deliberate way. And the nice thing about the rebounder is you can do a little bit of it and then you can take a break, as opposed to if you were going on a run, you still got to go all the way back, right? So it's a good transitional thing. And then as people get stronger, they can do more. They can do double feet. They can do single feet. They can lift up and come down. But it's all a process, and it can be great. Okay, but just jumping on a rebounder and like doing whatever willy-nilly workout may not be tummy safe. It really depends. It's quality and intentionality in what you're doing. And I feel like sometimes we've trained ourselves in fitness. I just want to go and zone out and just power through. That's a recipe for at some point an injury. I feel like when you are challenging your body in any form of fitness, it's a challenge. You need to be so much more intentional about form and quality in what you're doing so that you get the most bang for your buck. And I can tell you this, like I could swim forever. I could swim forever. It's not swimming is like walking to me, right? But if I'm going to be swimming hard, I need to swim with good form. Otherwise, I'm practicing bad form and I'm going to dislocate my shoulder like I did in college. It's about how you're doing it and your intentionality of it. Okay. All right. My next question, Lucy. So her question is not as fitness related, but I still put it on here. It says, when I engage my core, I continue to have a bulge where my mid-rectus abdominals are on either side of my belly button. Why is this and how can I reduce it and pull it back in? And then she gave me a little background that she's 5 months postpartum after her second baby, has been working on building her core and her transverse strength with breathing, posture, leg tilts, leg lifts, seeing a little change with the gap. It was 3 to 4 fingers at the belly button, and has increased. She's seen very little change at the gap, but she's increased the strength of her core. But it's still not anything happening at the belly button. Okay, so that's a lot of background information, but basically what is happening, I would suspect, is that she's a little disconnected. So sometimes you have different parts of your diastasis. You have the top part, you have right here at the belly button, then you have the lower part. And disconnect means you're not getting the sensory feedback. You send a signal and it doesn't do what you think it was going to do. It does something not at all, or it does something weird, something different. And it sounds like in this case, especially if you're doing leg tilts and leg lifts, that's something that I add in after you feel really connected to the whole line from the pubic bone all the way up to the top, the bottom of the sternum, kind of pulling together. So I would say that you might be thinking you're engaging, but at the very end you're bracing or you're tensing up, and that's different. Engaging and bracing are not the same thing. Engaging and tensing are not the same thing. Engaging the transverse is on the exhale, where it should elongate, thin, flatten your tummy, and pull everything up. So if you come in and then feel like it clenches and tenses up, you might be actually activating your rectus abdominis, or doing it at the last minute where you push out. And then if that is your strategy, then you possibly, when you're doing anything to challenge like a leg lift, that's what you're recruiting. So it's kind of like what I said just a minute ago, where you're reinforcing poor form. So I don't know if you've done any of our programs, but one of the things we work on a lot is kind of massaging the rectus abdominis muscle, and really doing some abdominal massage, and really doing some focused connection on that full activation before, and then starting out with small integration and then building it up. But I would say that that's probably what's happening. When people say I'm getting stronger, but I'm not changing the diastasis, then they probably are getting stronger, but they're not. They're maybe reinforcing the muscle imbalance. So the external muscles are getting stronger, but the internal muscles are lagging behind. And that muscle imbalance is part of what creates a diastasis and sustains a diastasis. We need to work on that. All right, Hannah. I've done your core foundations program, yay. And I've healed my diastasis once, but now I need to heal it again. Maybe she had another baby or something happened here. She also teaches Pilates, and wondering if I should avoid rolling like a ball, push-ups, modify saw, which is kind of like, I think, a little bit of rotation, where I only rotate my trunk a little. I'm wondering if still doing these things or working against myself. I feel like I'm going to be a broken record here. So in Pilates, I'm not a Pilates specialist. I'm not an instructor. That's just my disclaimer. But I've taken some Pilates classes, and I'm fairly familiar. So rolling like a ball, I think, is that intention is kind of like what I think about when I do the double knees to chest stretch, where I do put myself in that kidney bean position, but I'm not doing it as a strengthening exercise. I'm doing it as a stretching range of motion exercise. So I'm not pushing out on my belly when I do that, or bracing or tensing. I'm actually relaxing my tummy and allowing my back to be stretched. So if you're doing it in that way, it could be fine. It depends. Push-ups aren't like a negative thing to do, but if you have a diastasis and you're in a face down position for any reason, push-ups, planks, hands and knee position, gravity is going to allow your organs to drop down and press against the connective tissue. And so if you have this thin connective tissue and you have your muscles here and this weak connective tissue in the middle, and you're now in this face down position, it can allow everything to kind of drop down, and it puts a lot of extra pressure on the connective tissue, which can slow the healing process. Now, if you're doing that and you're straining, like in a push-up, and you find yourself kind of going, and you're bulging your tummy even more with the interabdominal pressure, yes, that can cause a problem. We have landscaping people outside that are going to start doing stuff outside, so it's going to be interesting. Hopefully it won't be too loud for you guys. Yeah. Fun. Okay, so if you have gotten your core really strong and the connective tissue is pretty strong, and you can engage your core on the effort of the push-up, then push-ups are totally fine. But most people aren't strong enough to do them well, so they do some kind of compensation. So we usually have people get that weight-bearing portion either using bands upright in a push-up type position, where you get, and that's what's nice about that, is you get the stretch on the back end and then the push-up, or push-ups on like a countertop on an incline. Just keep in mind, in general, push-ups are working on your pec muscles, and most of the clients that we see have tight pec muscles already and weak back muscles. So you want to think about why you're doing what you're doing to get the most bang for your buck. And then the rotation, Rotation can be all right as long as you exhale, engage, and rotate. What I try to avoid is kind of that rotation with a flexion, where you're kind of pushing and pulling apart the abdominal wall. That can be actually really dangerous. I thought I was doing really well before I knew anything about diastasis, after I had my baby, and I was doing a lot of crossover crunches. There's a lot of information out there with separated abdominal walls that that's the way to go, but it actually is a double whammy to your connective tissue because it pulls apart. It has like a pull apart and a shearing motion. So I'm fine with rotation that looks like this, but not what looks like this. So, stuff that kind of you're rotating here, but not here, if that makes sense. And that's something that I maybe in some of my exercise at this point, I do a rotation and a round, but it's not the main component of my workout. But I have a really strong, solid linea albia now, so I'm not as vulnerable as maybe somebody that's in the diastasis recti healing process. Okay. All right, another question. I think the name is Sullen. I don't want to say it wrong. Are there certain yoga poses that should be avoided permanently with a DR? Okay, so I'm not a yoga instructor and I don't know all the poses, but I would say that if you've had a diastasis recti and it's not healed, then for sure there's things you want to avoid. If you've healed a diastasis recti but you still have a history of it, there's some exercises that you want to minimize and maybe wouldn't be the most beneficial, because once you have an injury there, that injury it's vulnerable, right? It can be re-injured, and we don't want to do that if we can avoid it. So I would say stuff that put you in kind of like V-sit position, where you're kind of bulging out your tummy, or things where you're laying on your back and lifting your legs up and there's a bulging. I would really watch. Cobra is not a complete no, but it can be really dangerous, because if you have really hypermobility in your joints and a weakness in your core, you can do a lot of excessive rib flaring that can pull on the top part of the connective tissue. Back bends, like really extreme back bends, can really pull apart. But I know people that have gotten a really strong healed diastasis that can get back to doing those, but they have to get back to doing them in a slow progression so that you're stretching the right muscles and you're not stretching the connective tissue. So I would say in terms of permanently, I don't think it's a formula. I think it's more about understanding, do I have the strength to do this with where my core and my pelvic floor elongates and my transverse stabilizes me while I'm doing these things? And that's what you would want to look at. I know that Beth Learn, who's from Fit to Be, who's a fitness partner of us, she's done a ton of yoga training. And a lot of what's going on in yoga at times is the breath can get confusing with activating the core. And so I know at Fit to Be, she has a lot of yoga videos, and I've done yoga classes with her personally, where she's so great at coaching you through how important the breath is. So I would think about that, and think about looking at the breath with what you're doing, because that can be a huge make it or break it with yoga. Okay. Your other question was, what is the best way to tell if a type of exercise is putting pressure on your DR and should be avoided if you can't see any doming? That is the trick, right? So if usually you see a little doming or tenting, or you feel like your body pushes out, or pressure in your pelvic floor, which means there's inner abdominal pressure in that pushes down. So if you don't see it or you don't feel it, I would like for people to go more by what they're feeling, not necessarily more by what they're feeling, but also by what they're feeling, because you can't always look at what you're doing and do it well, right? As soon as you look at your tummy, you're now in a different position than you may have been with the exercise. The mirror, always helpful, but you want to think about, do I feel like I can exhale and engage and feel kind of grounded, connected, and really stable in my core when I'm doing the hardest part of this exercise, the hardest part of the work. We do a lot of stuff with our resistance bands, the tubing type bands with the handles here. These guys, where it can kind of has a little gadget that goes over the door, and then you can hook it over the door and you can kind of pull on them with the handles. I love the sensory feedback that kind of resistance training does for the stabilizer component of your core. So when you pull against something that's pulling back against you, your internal stabilizers, whether that's in your rotator cuff, in your hip sockets, or your corset, will have to find a way to activate. So it'll either tense up and bulge, or you'll exhale and you'll feel it really solid here. When I can get people to connect to that sensation and then be able to translate it into the other exercises they're doing, most exercises could be really great if you're doing them well and doing them with that connection. So I would say sometimes also it might be you might be subtly causing pressure on your belly, and you might not notice it until like maybe the next day you have some kind of like stress incontinence symptoms or some prolapse symptoms or something like that for women. Those can be signs that maybe you did too much. All right. Next question. Ellie, is it okay to ride a spin bike with a mild DR? And how about while you're doing the Core Foundations program? Okay, the cool thing that I like about spin bikes is you can really adjust the seats. I'm always looking with biking, I'm always looking, well, with everything, I'm looking, can we get keep our back straight and kind of hinge forward here versus kind of in that rounded position. So elongating and hinging. So think about adjusting the handlebars and the seat so that you can be on your sit bones and you can kind of hinge forward versus rounding forward. And think about your breathing. Start out slow and kind of think about, do you have to hold your breath or brace or bulge to do whatever part of the spin routine you're doing? So I would always say spend a little time on the bike outside of a spin class, and experiment. How does my core feel when I'm standing? How does it feel when I'm sitting? How does it feel with my arms up, with my arms down? But I think it's totally something you can do. It depends on where you are in the Core Foundations program. I allow in the first couple of weeks some pretty low impact exercise, which could be spinning if you're not doing it really pushing yourself. The reason is we're retraining your brain and your core to get your basic building blocks of stability and connection. And like I said before, exercise is always a challenge. So when you're challenging it, you might resort or pull towards your kind of default, your compensating muscles. You might overdo it with the wrong muscle. And when you're in the initial part of the rehab process, especially in Core Foundations, our online program, you want to make sure that you are getting those foundational pieces really like into a muscle memory pattern before we start to challenge it. Okay, so you can do a little bit of it, but don't do your big challenging workouts on that until you get into like week 5, 6, 7. We start to really integrate into that then. Okay. All right. Another question from Shannon, or a question from Shannon. I would like to be able to do more cardio and toning exercises. I try to walk rather vigorously, but I had to give up running due to pelvic floor weakness and some incontinence leakage. I know sit-ups and crunches are out, but what exercises are permitted? Okay, so cardio, in terms of cardio, there's lots of different things you can do. It's a big thing is the impact of running is probably too much for your pelvic floor. So once you've known that, it doesn't mean you can't ever get to it, but it's a progression to get back to running. If you love to run, there is a progression to get there, but don't run through those kinds of symptoms because they will not get better, they will get worse, right? And so you need to rehab and build up the strength. And I kind of talked a little bit about that in the rebounder part of it, right? Like that we start building up the coordination of that slow twitch and fast twitch muscles of the core and pelvic floor for slight impact movements, so you get that connection. But swimming can be a great cardio. Stationary bike can be a great cardio. If you're doing good form on a rowing machine where you can kind of hinge and keeping your back straight and exhaling as you're pulling back can be good cardio. Most things can be cardio. I do some standing hula hoop cardio workouts for Beth Learns Fit to Be. I do a lot of stuff with my bands. When we weren't able to get in the pool, I'm a swimmer by that's my sport. So when I wasn't able to get in the pool, I used my bands to simulate kind of swimming movements. And that was really good for your heart rate and getting some cardio, to getting your endorphins up, kind of feeling like that. So those can be really good options. There's a lot of dance classes that can be done really tummy safe that can get you up. You want to look for upright things as much as possible, or if you're swimming, you know, you're in this position and you're elongating positions. And then toning exercises, there's a ton of stuff. If you don't know about Fit to Be, I refer to them a lot because I'm not familiar with all the programs out there, but I am very familiar with their program because I'm a member there and I've done a lot of filming for them. And then I know Beth Learn personally, so we problem solve a lot of stuff. And she was also a contributor to our Tummy Safe Fitness Professional course. So I'm very confident and familiar there. But she does tons of tummy safe body weight stuff, as well as weight training stuff and toning stuff. I'm a huge fan of resistance bands. I do band works where I exhale and engage against the work of that and the pullback, and I add my legs into it, and I go slow, I go fast. I do a lot of variety of different movements in my arms and my engaging my core with every movement. So there's a lot of really good ideas. I'll put a link in the comment section of some guidelines for our Tummy Safe Fitness. We have like some guidelines that you can kind of look at all kinds of things and how to make it tummy safe. All right, Hannah, is it okay to do backstroke / how about butterfly? And what should I avoid in the pool? Oh, you're speaking my language. So I am a swimmer. I was a competitive swimmer in high school, and I was a collegiate athlete and swam all through college. And then I took a ton of time off. I needed a little bit of mental break from the intensity of it. But then I thought I didn't realize that I could have gone back sooner. But anyway, I didn't go back until about 9 years ago. And I've been swimming on a swim team ever since, and a master swim team with a bunch of amazing adults that love to swim. And I am a backstroker and I am a butterflyer. Those are my two main my specialties, right? So backstroke is often discouraged because you can really flare your ribs. So it's a lot about learning how to elongate. You have to have range of motion in your shoulder to get your arm back without lifting your rib up. And a lot of adults, especially moms who have been in parenting postures and rounded forward, as soon as they do this, they pull up on the rib. And the ribs are the top component of attachment part of the transverse. So if your ribs flare, it pulls apart the transverse. That puts excessive pressure on the connective tissue of the diastasis. Okay, so it's about learning the breathing and getting enough range of motion in your shoulders and strength in the muscles around your shoulder blades, the back muscles, and length in your pec muscles. Same with butterfly. It's a lot about length here and range of motion in your shoulder blades to be able to extend and get your arms all the way over without flaring the ribs. Because butterfly, you have this movement already. You don't want it to be up out of your rib cage. You want to feel like you're nice and strong and connected as you're doing that. I actually have a whole video on diastasis recti and swimming, and I go through all of the actual strokes and how to connect your core within each stroke. And I also talk about starts, and I talk about flip turns. I talk about all of it. So I'll link that in the comment section too, because, you know, if you're not a swimmer, that's not going to be very interesting to you. But if you are a swimmer, it's going to be really interesting to you. But what you really want to avoid in the pool is the same as everything else. The pool actually gives you quite a bit of protection because you naturally elongate when you're swimming, and the water tension kind of supports your core. And for women, like the bathing suit kind of gives us, it's not quite like a splint, but it kind of gives us that nice connected feeling around our core, especially if you're wearing kind of a racing suit that's a little bit snugger. That can really help you feel, oh, am I pushing out of my tummy or am I pulling in? But you want to look at the same things as everything else. Are you holding your breath? Are you pushing your belly out? Are you flaring your ribs? Are you arching your back too much? And really getting the connection with your core and your breath. When, I feel like that with every stroke, like freestyle, I blow out and then I take a breath. And on every exhale, when I'm pulling down against the resistance of the water, I'm exhaling, my tummy zips up, and I'm reinforcing that connected strength with every stroke. Like I said, I think it's a huge component of what finally healed the last part of my diastasis, because it was just so much consistency and overall coordination with my body. All right, so I'll put a link on that. All right, and then I have 2 more questions, and then unless anybody posts anything, I'm gonna wrap it up. So one is from Annette. She just found out she has a diastasis. Sorry, it's a lot of information to process, but look at our website because we have tons of resources for you. Is there anything she needs to do differently having a C-section? So what I'm assuming this question is that you've had a C-section in the past, and you want to know if that's going to affect how you heal, or I can't tell if you're maybe pregnant and you're going to have a C-section. But I'm going to answer it. I guess I can answer both questions. I'm going to answer the first question is, so if you've had a C-section in the past, is there something you need to do differently when you're rehabbing when you're dealing with a diastasis stuff? So yes and no. The core still is going to be retrained the same way. So we're still going to work on, it's the same program. We don't have a specific C-section recovery program. Core Foundations is the same program, whether you had a C-section or not, or whether you never even had a baby. But there are going to be some specific disconnect and possibly some scar tissue issues, and also maybe some adhesions. And we talk about that with some abdominal massage stuff. We talk about splinting and not trying to kind of put extra pressure on that connective tissue as well. So really looking at kind of some of those things. But yes, she could totally heal. If she had some trauma to the abdominal wall, then we would want to kind of look at that. But for the most part, a surgery is a trauma, so it's protecting the scar but allowing the connective tissue or the muscles to continue to heal, and really working on getting blood flow to that area so you can feel and move and really for people that have had C-sections years ago, same thing. We really start to get some blood flow down, even if it feels numb and kind of dead down there. It's really hard to activate and connect to muscles you can't feel. So getting some blood flow in there can make a big difference, even if it's been years. If she's pregnant and she knows she's going to have a C-section, we have a specific preparing for abdominal surgery C-section prep course that you could take while you're pregnant. And it talks about all the prenatal and postpartum stuff, but it talks specifically about the surgical procedure and surgical recovery. So we have that as well. And then I have one more question. Then it looks like I have a question about golfing, and I'll do my best to answer that. I'm not a golfer, but I've helped a lot of golfers. So Jessica said, I love to garden. Are there movements I should avoid while recovering? Gardening can be so hard on a diastasis and on a weak core because it's a lot of bending over. It's strenuous. It's a lot of looking down. What I try to tell people is really think about the pelvis rib cage alignment and learning how to exhale and engage on the work. And I encourage long handle tools, like instead of bending over to pull every weed, have a long handled hoe close by where you can kind of just dig up each one of those, and then a long-handled mini rake where you just kind of pull them all into the center, and then you have your bucket there, and you go down once or twice to get them into the bucket. So you're not bending, pushing out over and over. I also think that doing a tall kneel with like one of those gardening pads where you're in a tall kneel and you can hinge forward versus kind of bending over and clumping forward all the time. Looking at that golfer's reach where you kind of, let's see if I can demonstrate that where you guys can all see. But the golfer's reach is where you kind of kick your leg out and you reach down, where you keep your back straight. That can be really helpful to avoid so much bending. And then stretch, elongate and stretch multiple times throughout the process. Anything you can do, you can bring up to do at kind of a countertop height. So if you're repotting plants or you're doing anything like that where you can have like a table or a counter or something that you can bring things up can be really helpful too. And just spacing it out. I think a lot of people hurt themselves gardening because it's like, oh, this is the weekend to turn the garden. This is the weekend to get all the planting done. So it's a lot of those activities all at once. So I think in those times you have to really have a game plan so you don't hurt yourself. Okay, so I had two other questions that came across. One is, do I have any resources or tips about golfing? So I work with a lot of golfers, a lot of men specifically, it doesn't have to be. And I actually talk a lot about this in our Core Foundations for Men program because there can be like a rotation component. And if you have poor posture, you can kind of be rounded and you can kind of do that rounded and twist. So I break it down into components where we want to look at their overall alignment, connection to the core first, watching how tight they might be in their chest muscles and any weakness they have in their back from computer work or poor posture and stuff like that, so that we have a good movement. And then we start doing kind of some swing movements where your core stays engaged so you get the range of motion you need. So you're not trying to substitute with range of motion for like stabilization and pushing out on your tummy or bracing. And then we do some stuff with the bands where we take the band and kind of go through. So and this is really how I address most sports. I break it down into components and we work on the components and then we put the components back together. I don't actually have I don't have a video on golfing. I don't feel confident enough in my golfing knowledge to do that, but I do work a lot with people in that and pulling it together. Another question that I see here, and this is not related to fitness, but I'm going to answer anyway. It says, is 3 months postpartum too late to wear a belt for DR? So I think by belt, what you're referring to is an abdominal rehab splint. 3 months postpartum, absolutely not. I mean, it's really never too late, but it's not just about the splint, okay? The splint is a component. It's like 1/5 of the rehab process that we do at the tummy team. But the splint alone is not actually the solution because it can support you temporarily, but then it can also make you a little dependent on it. It's a fine line, right? You want the support and reinforcement of the splint without it feeling like another crutch. Now I can't do anything without the splint, okay? So we have almost, I would say 95% of our clients splint in the first portion of their rehab process. And the splints we sell cover as much of their transverse as possible without being too restrictive. And it should feel supportive and like a hug, okay? And it should feel like it reinforces and reminds you to use your core and your optimal alignments throughout the day. So if you are not connected to those muscles, that's really hard. But if you're doing it as part of your rehab process, super effective. So 3 months postpartum, this is prime time. As soon as you can kind of take in new information in your brain, which is usually the biggest limitation when we have a newborn is brain capacity and ability to learn. As soon as you can do that, you can do Core Foundations, and I would absolutely recommend splinting. If you're not quite ready, You can actually splint a little bit now, but really don't just do the splint alone. You can wait for a couple of weeks or a couple months and then start the program. It's not too late. Okay, so tips for riding a bicycle. Similar to the spin bike situation, I love to ride a bike, but road bikes can be really difficult. So it depends on what kind of bike you're having and where you are in your rehab process. So if you are, if you are still healing your core and you want to ride a bike, I would really think about adjusting the seats, trying to get the handlebar up and the seat down a little bit so you're more upright, hinged forward instead of rounded over your handlebars. And really think about kind of being as elongated, and as you push on the pedals, coordinate, like feeling very connected to your core comes in as you push down, right? So it's just a little whoo, 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 as you pedal. So it can be really good, but if you have more of a road bike or a bike that doesn't adjust as much and you're really rounded over, I think that sometimes can be really challenging on the healing process. If you feel like you have a fairly strong, you've healed it quite a bit, then you could probably do some of that, but you want to balance it out with other exercises that get you out of that alignment, that open up your chest, elongate your body, kind of reach your hands overhead, kind of doing some of these opening, working on your back muscles and extension muscles, not just all the flexion muscles. So you have a balance, because riding a bike is a lot of repetition in kind of your kidney bean posture. So as much as I love it, it can kind of be detrimental if it's your main form of, fitness, and you still have a diastasis. Okay. I love that I'm getting some questions while I'm still on. All right. So, okay. So Hannah, you just put a message on Facebook about Pilates and stuff. I actually already answered that, so I'm not going to answer it again, but this live is going to broadcast and then you can look back. And I answered that one earlier in the live. Okay, so I did answer that question for you already about what to modify. And if you are a member of Fit to Be, Beth is also really great to look at some of the ways she modifies. I know there are a lot of fitness professionals that are part of Fit to Be because Beth has already done a lot of the work and how to modify certain things to make them tummy safe. So you can kind of glean that knowledge from her and help implement that into the way you guys teach your classes. And it's just an amazing resource for you, okay? All right, I don't see any new questions. And I feel like I talked really constant for 42 minutes here. So I hope that's helpful for you guys. I'm not an expert on every exercise out there. I want you to kind of, if you can get one thing from this particular live, I want you to get that it's less of a formula. It's less of a, do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this. There is a component of that, especially in the early stages of rehab. But once we get you, so there's rehab, then there's lifestyle, and then there's fitness, okay? Rehab is really, you have to be pretty structured to get the balance thing, but I don't want you to live in rehab very long. I want you to get into your lifestyle as soon as possible. And then I also want you to understand when you go into fitness, that's a challenge, and you need the building blocks, the lifestyle, and be smart about what you're doing. Your time is so valuable. Don't waste it doing something that looked good and you thought was right, but you made you feel terrible. Okay, so just we have a couple of blogs on our website about the guidelines of tummy safe fitness. We have some resources about tummy safe fitness on our website as well. So I'll try to connect a couple of those to this feed so you guys have that, and you can look back, and I'll connect the one about swimming as well. I see one more question. Said, I didn't finish core foundations and I'm pregnant again. Congratulations. Do I pick up and finish core foundations, or do I need to switch and purchase prenatal? I'm going to have you email us, because we could do it both ways. You could do it both ways depending on your personal situation. So go ahead and email us. You can go to the contact form on our thing. It says program questions on thetummyteam.com, or you can also email Sierra at the Tummy Team, and she can help answer that question, ask you a couple more clarifying questions so we get you the right answer. Okay? Or you could, if you're on the forum, you could put that on the forum and I can answer you there too, the client forum. Since you've done core foundations, I'm assuming you may be on the client forum. Okay. All right. We are going to have another Facebook Live next week. And I can't remember what the topic is. It's either diastasis recti and men or diastasis recti prenatal postpartum. And either way, you're going to get information about it. Those are the next two that we have. One's next week, one's the week after. And I would really love to answer your questions. I feel like this is really helpful for a lot of people. And I love to hear what you guys, what your questions are. So it helps us guide how we teach our programs and what resources we make available to you, understanding what is relevant and necessary for you guys to know. Okay, thanks so much. Reach out to us if you have any questions, and we would love to work with you. Okay, all right, thank you.